I thought I was done. Done with my family, done with the pain, done with the people who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. My ex-wife had taken everything, my heart, my trust, and now my family had chosen her over me. I walked away, cutting all ties, severing the bonds that had tied me to them for years. But then, one cold night, the phone rang. My mother's voice, frantic, desperate. "Come quickly, it's urgent." I didn't want to. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't ignore her. What I didn't know was that answering that call would throw me back into a world of chaos I'd tried so hard to leave behind. It wasn't the first time my family had chosen her over me. It wasn't even the second or third. But this time it was the last straw. I had spent years fighting for my marriage, fighting for the family I thought I had. When I first married Emma, I truly believed we had everything ahead of us. She was beautiful, charming, a whirlwind of energy. Our life together seemed like a dream, until it wasn't. The cracks had appeared slowly at first, tiny fissures in what I had believed to be a perfect life. Little things, late nights at work, unexplained absences, secretive text messages. But I was blinded by love, or maybe just the idea of love, and ignored them. It wasn't until I found the text messages on her phone that I knew. She hadn't just been distant. She'd been lying. She was seeing someone else. Someone that wasn't me.
The affair shattered me. I thought I could forgive her. I wanted to forgive her. I loved her after all, but the trust was gone. No matter how hard I tried to rebuild it, it crumbled under the weight of the betrayal. The divorce was inevitable. It was painful, yes, but I could handle that. What I couldn't handle was what came after. What I couldn't handle was the way my family, my own blood, it chose her over me. It started with my mother. She'd always adored Emma, always thought of her as the perfect daughter-in-law. She called me every day, begged me to reconsider, urged me to work it out. Love conquers all, she would say. But it didn't. Not this time. Not after everything Emma had done. And when I finally stood my ground and told her I was leaving Emma for good, it felt like a betrayal to my mother. The disappointment in her voice was palpable. But I stood firm. My father was no better. The man who had raised me, who had always prided himself on being a beacon of strength, had softened in his old age. "I just think you should be more understanding, son," he told me one evening when we sat in his study. "People make mistakes. You don't want to throw everything away just because of one mistake." I couldn't believe my ears. One mistake? What about the lies, the betrayal, the years of me pouring my heart into a relationship that Emma had dismantled like a house of cards? But in his eyes, it was just a mistake. He didn't see the way she had torn me apart. He didn't see what I had lost.
It was clear to me that they were still holding on to the idea of Emma that existed before the affair. They couldn't see her for who she really was, and the more I tried to make them understand, the further they pushed me away. They still saw her as their daughter, their perfect little girl. It didn't matter that she had broken me. In their eyes, I was the one being unreasonable. But what hurt the most was how they never took my side. No one ever asked how I was doing, how I felt. They didn't care that I was struggling to move on, to piece together my life again. No, all they cared about was Emma, my ex-wife, the woman who had chosen someone else over me, the woman who had left me in the dust. One evening, when I was at my breaking point, I decided it was time to sever the ties once and for all. I had been hanging on to the idea of family for far too long, thinking that if I just kept trying, things would eventually get better. But the truth was they had already made their decision. They had chosen Emma, and in doing so, they had abandoned me. It was time to walk away. I didn't know how I was going to do it, or if I was even ready, but I couldn't keep living in this toxic limbo. I packed my things, packed up the years of my life that had been entwined with Emma's, and moved out. I rented a small apartment, no bigger than a shoebox, but it was mine. It was the first time in years that I felt a sense of control.
For weeks, I stayed in that apartment, wallowing in my own hurt and anger. The phone calls from my parents kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. I ignored them all. I couldn't bear to hear their pleas. It felt like they were asking me to forgive not just Emma, but them too, for the way they had failed me when I needed them most. I filled my days with work, buried myself in the kind of distractions that kept my mind from wandering back to that dark place. I started running, pushing myself harder each day. It was the only thing that helped. The exhaustion from the miles, the rhythm of my feet on the pavement, it allowed me to forget, even for a few hours, the pain that was eating away at me. But the silence was unbearable. I hadn't seen Emma in months, but I knew she was still out there, living her life without a care for the wreckage she had left behind. And then there was my family, who had completely shut me out, had turned their backs on me because I wasn't willing to pretend everything was fine. I couldn't pretend anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. The call came on a Wednesday evening, right as I was preparing a simple meal for myself. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, and I saw the name flash across the screen. Mom.
I stared at it for a long time before I picked it up. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue the silence that had come to define our relationship. But another part of me, the part that had been yearning for answers, picked up the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice cold. "Michael, it's your mother," she said, her voice trembling, frantic. "You need to come home. It's urgent. Please, it's your father. He's not well. We need you here." The words hit me like a slap to the face. My heart sank, but something inside me twisted. The bitter part of me wanted to hang up the phone, to walk away and tell her that I didn't owe her anything anymore. But the reality was that my father was sick. He was my father, no matter what had happened between us. And in that moment, I couldn't ignore the call for help. "I'll be there in a few hours," I said, my voice betraying no emotion, no sign of the turmoil I was feeling inside. I ended the call and stood there, staring at the floor. My mind raced, torn between the urge to protect myself from more pain and the obligation to be there for my family, no matter how broken we were. The drive back to my parents' house was long, and every mile felt like a journey back into a world I had tried so hard to leave. I didn't know what I would find when I got there. I didn't know if I was ready to face the people who had chosen my ex-wife over me, but what choice did I have? They were still my parents, and in some twisted way, I still loved them. As I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that this would be the moment that decided everything. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive them, but I knew I had no choice but to walk through that door. The house looked just as it always had, a quiet, nostalgic kind of place, tucked away at the end of a long cul-de-sac. My childhood home, the same place where I'd learned to ride a bike, where my father had taught me to throw a baseball, where my mother had sat at the kitchen table rolling out dough for cookies, all while humming some old tune. It was where I had felt safe, loved, and certain of the world. Now, as I parked the car and stepped out onto the cracked driveway, it felt like a different universe. The house, once so familiar, now seemed foreign, full of shadows I couldn't quite reach. I walked up the front steps, each one creaking under my weight as if the house itself was sighing in protest at my return. The air felt thick, laden with history, memories of dinners shared, arguments fought, and secrets kept. I had shut this door behind me months ago, but now it felt like I was walking back into a place I didn't belong anymore. The door opened before I had the chance to knock, and there she was. My mother. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with worry, like she hadn't slept in days. Her frail hands trembled as she motioned for me to come in.
"You're here," she whispered, as if my presence alone could somehow fix everything. But I knew, deep down, that nothing could fix what had been broken. "I'm here, Mom," I said softly, trying to muster some warmth in my voice. But the chill that had settled between us for months didn't dissipate. It hovered, cold and sharp. She stepped aside to let me in, and as I entered, I felt a mix of dread and reluctant familiarity. The house was just as I remembered it. The worn leather couch in the living room, the clock on the wall that had always been a little too loud, the smell of my mother's lavender candles that always filled the air. Nothing had changed. Nothing except me. I had changed, and so had my family. "Your father's in the back room," she said, her voice breaking slightly as she led me down the narrow hallway. He's not doing well, Michael. He's been so distant. He won't eat. He won't talk. He's not the man he used to be. Please, you need to talk to him." I nodded, my chest tight. There was a lump in my throat, but I swallowed it down, pushing the feeling of helplessness aside. I'd walked away from this house months ago, determined to protect myself from more heartache. But now I was back. Not for them, certainly not for Emma, but for him, my father.
We reached the back room, the door slightly ajar. The soft light from the hallway spilled in, casting a shadow of him on the far wall. He was sitting in his favorite armchair by the window, staring out at the overgrown garden that my mother used to tend to. He looked smaller somehow, frailer. The man who had always been so imposing, so strong, was now hunched over, his hands resting limply in his lap. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. "Dad?" I said quietly. He didn't move at first, as if he hadn't heard me, but then, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes were tired, a dull gray, and they flicked over me without recognition for a moment, as if trying to place me. When they finally settled on my face, a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed his features. "Michael." His voice was hoarse, and it broke on the name. I hadn't heard him say my name in so long. It felt like a stranger's voice. I was unsure how to react,
unsure how to feel. "Dad," I said, stepping closer, "Mom said you weren't doing well. What's going on?" He leaned back in his chair, his hands slowly rising to wipe his face, as if he were trying to brush away years of regret. "I don't know anymore, son. I just don't know."
His voice cracked, and I saw the way his shoulders sagged, the weight of something unspoken hanging heavy between us. It wasn't just his physical health that was failing. There was something deeper, something that had been unraveling for a long time. "You're not eating," I said, a hint of anger creeping into my voice. "What's going on, Dad? Why are you doing this to yourself?" He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared out the window, his eyes unfocused, lost in thought. I didn't think it would come to this, Michael. I didn't think I'd lose my son over this, over her. "Over who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The anger was simmering, threatening to boil over, but I pushed it down, trying to remain calm. "Emma," he whispered, his voice barely audible. There it was, the name that had destroyed everything. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "You still think about her, don't you? After everything she did, after the way she hurt me, you still think about her?" The words stung, each one cutting deeper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. It was like all the hurt, all the anger that I had buried deep inside me for months was suddenly pouring out uncontrollably. My father's eyes flicked to me, and I saw something in them. Guilt, yes, but also confusion. "She was a good woman, Michael. She wasn't always like this. You don't understand. I thought she was a part of the family. I thought we were doing the right thing, trying to help her."
"Help her?" I snapped. "You thought you were helping her by picking her over me? By pretending that what she did didn't matter? You can't just pretend like none of this happened. She betrayed me. She destroyed everything we had." I know, he whispered, his voice trembling. "But I didn't want to lose you, son. And I didn't want to lose her either. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix it." My breath hitched in my chest as I took a step back, the weight of his words pressing down on me. "You didn't know how to fix it? You had one choice, Dad. You could have chosen me, but you didn't." His eyes filled with tears, and he looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe if I helped her, if I took her side, I could save everything. I didn't want to lose you both." The tears that welled in his eyes were almost too much to bear. I hadn't seen my father cry in years. He had always been the strong, stoic figure I'd relied on, the man who had always known what to say, what to do. But now, he was broken. He had failed me, failed us both. I didn't know what to say. I was caught between the desire to scream, to lash out, and the longing to heal, to find a way back to the man I had once respected. But it felt impossible. The hurt ran too deep. The gulf between us was too wide.
"I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt like acid in my mouth, but they were the truth. "I don't know if I can forgive any of you. You chose her. You chose the woman who destroyed everything. You chose the person who tore apart our family. And now, you expect me to just forget it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he lowered his head, his hands trembling. It was clear that the man who had always been a tower of strength was no more. The weight of his own guilt had shattered him. And in that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just Emma who had destroyed everything. It was all of us. My mother, my father, and me. We had all failed, in one way or another. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, heavy with the things we both wished we could say but couldn't. And then, finally, my father spoke, his voice barely audible. "Please, Michael, don't leave me like this. I'm sorry, I don't know how to make it right." I stood there, my heart heavy in my chest, torn between the man who had raised me and the man who'd chosen someone else over me. But there was one thing I knew for sure. Nothing could ever be the same again.
I turned to leave without another word, the pain and the betrayal too much to bear. And yet, as I walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something far worse than just my father's apology. What did they want from me now? I stood in the doorway for a long time, my hand on the cold brass doorknob. I could hear my father's voice fading behind me, his words still hanging in the air, heavy and unresolved. I knew he was sorry. He had said it 100 times, but no amount of apologies could undo what had been done. His face, his tear-streaked eyes, were a reflection of the broken man that I had once admired. But it wasn't enough. I walked out of the room, down the hall, past the photos on the walls that once told the story of a family united, now reduced to a painful reminder of the years we had lost. My mother was in the living room when I passed, her hands wringing a dish towel as she stared at the floor, waiting for me to speak. But I had nothing to say to her either. Not yet. I turned and walked out the front door without a word, the crisp evening air hitting my face like a slap. I needed to get away, to breathe, to process everything I had just seen, heard, and felt. My mind was spinning, caught between a whirlwind of memories and anger. I had always thought of my family as a pillar of support. But now, everything I had built in my mind, every belief I had held about loyalty and love, seemed like a mirage, disappearing the moment I needed it most.
I got into my car and slammed the door shut, the metal of the vehicle echoing the violence of my emotions. The engine rumbled to life and I peeled out of the driveway, speeding down the road, desperate for escape. But where was I going? What was I running from? It wasn't just my family. It wasn't just Emma. It was everything. The illusion of normalcy had shattered, and I was left standing in the ruins of my life, surrounded by the wreckage of people I thought I could trust. The drive was long and aimless. My mind kept circling back to the same painful question. Why didn't they choose me? Why had they failed me in such an irrevocable way? And even if they were sorry now, was it too late? Was it even worth trying to fix things? As I drove further from my childhood home, I couldn't help but think about Emma, about the way things had ended. I had spent so many years blaming her, hating her for what she had done. But now I realized I was no longer angry with her. I was angry at myself. Angry at myself for trusting too easily, for hoping when I should have known better. The truth was, Emma had been a reflection of my own misplaced faith. She had given me everything I thought I wanted, and then, just as quickly, taken it all away. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I felt like I was drowning. The realization that I had no one left to turn to, no one left who had my back, hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no one to save me. Not my parents, not my ex-wife. I was alone. And it was suffocating. The phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the silence in the car. I glanced at the screen, already knowing who it was, my mother. She'd been calling incessantly since I left, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The weight of that decision was unbearable, but I had to face it. This wasn't about my family anymore. It was about me, about what I was willing to tolerate, about what I could forgive. I let the phone ring, watching it vibrate on the seat beside me until the call finally stopped. For a moment, the silence felt like a balm on my wounds. But then another notification buzzed on my phone. A message this time. Please come back. Your father needs you. I need you. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as my eyes began to well up. There was so much pain in her message, so much regret, but the anger inside me pushed it all away. I was done. Done being the one who always had to pick up the pieces. Done being the one who always had to forgive. But then another thought crept into my mind. What if it's too late? What if I don't go back? What if I shut them out completely and I never get another chance to make things right? Was I really prepared to let everything go? I took a deep breath, wiping my face with my hand as I stared at the empty road ahead. The darkness outside seemed endless, just like the pain inside me. I didn't know what the right answer was. I didn't know if I should walk away forever or go back and try to rebuild what had been destroyed. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized something. I had no idea how to fix any of this. I was stuck in the limbo of wanting to make everything right, but not knowing where to begin. I pulled back into the driveway of my parents' house hours later, the headlights cutting through the night like a knife. The house was quiet now, eerily so. I parked the car and sat there for a moment staring at the front door. It felt like an eternity since I'd walked out of it, but it had only been a few short hours. The weight of the decision I had to make settled over me, suffocating me, making it hard to breathe. I got out of the car and walked to the front door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I raised my hand to knock, the door opened before I even had the chance to make contact. My mother stood there, her face pale, her eyes tired and red from crying. But there was something else in her gaze,
a look of fear, of desperation that I couldn't ignore. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Please, Michael, your father's condition has worsened. You need to see him. You need to talk to him before it's too late." The words hit me like a hammer. Too late? For what? For him? For us? I stepped inside, my mind spinning. My father was in the same room, sitting in his armchair by the window where I had left him earlier. He looked even smaller now, almost frail. His eyes were closed, but there was a faint rise and fall of his chest, as if he were struggling to hold on to life itself. "Dad?" I said softly, walking up to him. He opened his eyes slowly, squinting as if the light was too bright. His gaze found mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. There were no words to be said, just the weight of everything that had happened, of everything that had been left unsaid. "You came back," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was all still there, festering beneath the surface, but it was joined now by something else, something more painful, a deep gnawing sorrow for the man who had been my father, the man who had failed me.
"I'm sorry, son," he murmured. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't want to lose you." "I don't know what to say, Dad," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can go back to what we were, but I can't walk away either. I can't pretend like none of this matters." His eyes filled with tears, and he reached out a trembling hand to touch mine. "I don't want you to forgive me for my sake. I want you to forgive me for yours, so you can move on, so you can live the life you deserve. Please, don't carry this with you forever." I sat down beside him, my heart heavy with the weight of his words. Maybe I couldn't forgive him today, and maybe I never would. But in that moment, I understood something. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean going back to what had been before. It meant finding a way to let go of the past, even if it wasn't perfect, even if it wasn't easy. "I don't know what will happen, Dad," I said quietly, "but I'm here, and I'll be here even if it's just for a while." And in that silence, as the night stretched on and the world outside seemed to hold its breath, I knew that this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning of trying to heal, the beginning of trying to let go of the past. But I was going to take it one step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.